Hi there. You're listening to the Everglade Chronicles, a reading. I'm Garrett Shave, the author. Today we find ourselves enduring house arrest with our protagonist, the Cloverlord. I will be reading Chapter 9, A Lord Imprisoned. Now let's get started. A prisoner in a pristine world, that is what I was. I was simply awaiting my death sentence, for the Emperor had placed me under arrest. I was to remain in my own little lordship under heavy guard. The Commandant managed to get his white-cloaked sentinels to stand in for my regular guards, and he told me I could trust them. They were part of the resistance, or so he said. Eva was barred from visiting me, as she belonged to the observatory. I only had Victor and Lucille. The following day, the attack happened. Victor returned at near sundown with a report. Mantis had been with me the entire day, unaware presently of what was occurring on the Gaia border. He did not seem the least bit bothered with Victor filling me in on the battle raid. It was as I had suspected, a border raid, some hazing and minor skirmishes with foreign forces. We did a great job of scaring them, Victor said, playing the part of actor perfectly. Mantis had to know that I was a loyalist to the Emperor. In his presence, I had to be devoted to the Exalted One. Excellent, I remarked. Perhaps some day soon they will be forced to enter back into the Empire, and the Exalted One will have his Gaia. On the inside I was feeling awful. I could not have stopped the attacks, but at least I had done my part and warned Oberyn of the impending doom. Over the course of the next week or so, whenever I arrived in the meadow, Mantis was waiting for me. Dutiful and silent, he was always there, like a shadow. As we walked one afternoon towards my home, I saw Cutty Sark out on the water. He waved at me, and I waved back. "Who is that?" Mantis asked as Cutty sailed by. "Cutty Sark," I answered. "Do you not know him?" "I have never seen that boy before. Is he new here?" I shook my head. "He has been around for a while. I am surprised you do not know him. He is a pirate lad, quite curious, really. He disappears for days on end. No one knows where he goes." Mantis stared at Cutty as he sailed away. He said nothing, instead choosing to contemplate. Mantis hardly spoke, but I liked to ask questions. Oftentimes he would ignore me, but there were several evenings when he opened up and told me about his life. He was actually a judo champion in our county, and was going to fight in the provincials. He also had a younger sister named Maggie, who he affectionately and jokingly called Mags. Some afternoons we would play chess, and other times we would play card games. "Where did you get the name Mantis?" I asked him one evening. We were playing Go Fish. I watched his expression change. It was one of reflection. He was wearing his usual green armor with ripped arms, testing its durability. "Our master gave us these names," he said quietly, not looking up from his cards. "When he trained us all, these were the ancient titles he chose based on our martial arts training." "What was your master's name?" I probed. While originally a pupil of the Commandant, I had another sensei. He called himself Master Rhino. He was a good person, strong, determined, reasonable. "The Commandant told me that your master was eliminated," I said. "Have any threes?" Mantis passed me his 3 of hearts and nodded. Yes, that was a dark day. Rhino did not like how the Dragon Emperor was progressing. He did not initially see the darkness in his heart. Master Rhino trained all of us, including the Exalted One. The dragon had gone against the grain, against the way of his traditional training. For that, the Emperor eliminated Rhino for his transgressions. "Did Rhino train you all with the intent of taking over the meadow?" Mantis looked up at me, eyes blank. "No," he said quickly, returning his gaze to his cards. "The Dragon Emperor had these plans in motion while we were being taught. Rhino stood aside, impartial to the Emperor's conquest. He tried to support him, but found that his heart prevented it. The Emperor called him weak and invasive and had him executed." I nodded. "Did Alexei have a name like yours?" He mentioned he was trained by the same master. Again, Mantis nodded. "He did, but after Dragon became the sovereign, he assumed the name of Commandant Alexei. His name previously had been Monkey." "Thank you for sharing," I said. Mantis grunted. "Have any 5s?" There was hardly any news from Alexei at all after that week, and the end of school was approaching quickly. The battle against Gaia had gone off without a hitch, and it infuriated Oberyn to the point where he recalled his ambassador. The summer was approaching, and so was the inevitable war. Will this house arrest ever end? I asked Mantis one Friday evening. It was a week before the last day of school, and I was eager to hear some news. I did not know if I was going to die or live. It is not my place to decide, he said astutely. I do not know. Do you know if the Emperor will execute me? He shook his head. I am sure you know, but you just aren't telling me, I sighed, moving to sit on my rock throne. Victor had been sick the last couple of days, and I had not seen him. Mantis was slowly becoming less marble and brick and more human-like. In a way, I should think we were becoming steady friends. He looked over at me with caring eyes, noticing my sadness. It is not your fault that your cousin is Queen Isis, he said, crossing his burly arms. It is also not your fault that she acted on her own accord and did what she thought was right. You were only guilty by association. Did I hear someone mention my name? A familiar voice said suddenly. I stood up immediately, looking around for the voice. That had to be Jessica. I looked over at the bridge. It was covered in guards. I turned to the path behind me, and there she was. Tall, statuesque, with long, flowing brown hair. She still had her watermelon-colored spectacles. She smiled and placed one agile hand on her hip, and then walked towards me. She was wearing sharp pleather pants and a red bomber jacket. Embracing me, I could smell her designer perfume. Who is this samurai-clad warrior? She asked. Mantis was frozen. Queen Isis was before him. That's Mantis, I said. He's part of the Emperor's task force, the Elite Four. Yes, I recall you mentioning them, she remarked, adjusting her glasses. What's all this? I hear about the Dragon Emperor imprisoning you. You seem so rushed in your messages. I had been talking with Jessica back and forth over the past few weeks, mainly after I had become imprisoned. She was curious to know the true identity of the Emperor, given his utter hatred for the Walker family. I explained to her fully what was going on and that Mantis was my guardian and warden. I see, she mumbled. Mantis, do you know who the Dragon Emperor really is? I do, Majesty, but I am sworn not to reveal it on penalty of death. He bowed gently. Entirely understandable, she muttered. Just as she was about to speak again, Commandant Alexei came over the bridge. Wow! Jessica exclaimed. I love your costume. Alexei was confused and he drew his sword. Who is this unauthorized visitor? Queen Isis, Mantis swallowed. Alexei let his sword drop as he froze. After a moment of scanning, he nodded. Of course, it could be no other. The glasses. The glasses are what says it all. I remember now. I am here to do a little investigating, she said, mostly as Queen Isis, but somewhat as Jessica Walker. Do you, black-clad cape guy, know who the Dragon Emperor really is? My name is Commandant Alexei, he growled, picking up his fallen blade. And yes, I do. We are friends outside of this game and at school. Care to divulge his true identity? This Mantis fellow is under oath to keep it a secret, Jessica carried on. I am eager to know why he hates our family so much. He sounds entirely familiar to me. Commandant Alexei sighed and crossed his arms. Mantis, please leave us. The samurai nodded and crossed the bridge. While Mantis might have been a friend, he was still sworn to protect the Emperor. Sending him across the bridge was a risky move. You know him well enough, Jessica, Alexei carried on. When I first began here, before my accident, he would speak of you often. I used to visit the meadow as a youngling, and you were the ruler then. I have come to greatly respect you. The matter became worse when Theo arrived. The Emperor did not even want to admit him to the game. I knew Theo would be our salvation, another Walker. Certainly, this timid young lad with cool glasses would incite rebellion, but the Emperor was on his case faster than white on rice. Well, Jessica gave a smug smile. Seems us Walkers are great at rebellion. That is what I was hoping, Majesty, he carried on. The Dragon Emperor's real name is Hudson Shepherd. He was the Duke of Sunset during the reign of Venus, and was vanquished by Queen Isis during the liberation battles. During the early reign of Luke, he returned with a great army of kids from outside the meadow and swept in like a blanket of thick snow over a summer landscape. He established his ironclad rule and founded the empire based on ancient Japan and China. He began the propaganda of his demigod status and reinforced that he could be defeated by no earthly being. Now, we are here today, less than 2 years into his terrible reign. Jessica was at a loss for words. Her jaw hung open, unable to comprehend. "Hudson," she spat. "That damn Dragon Emperor, fierce as he might appear to be, is really that little brat Hudson? I can hardly believe this." "You know this jester?" I asked my cousin. Jessica nodded. "Let's just say he was a little upstart then, and it sounds like he's a little upstart terror now, too. I served him as royal attendant. The young tyrant was also royal attendant to my consort, before disappearing a summer later." I gasped. This was the connection. "He must be stopped," Commandant Alexei remarked. "I originally believed in his rule, for he promised peace and prosperity, yet he could never drown out the stories of Queen Isis." "Oh, I believe it," Jessica growled, "and I can see why now he would be threatened by a walker." The Commandant exchanged looks with Mantis, who was calmly waiting half across the bridge. It would not look good if he was there much longer. "My deepest apologies, Majesty, but I must ask you to leave," Alexei said with a dear sadness in his voice. "It is unwise for you to remain here, especially in the company of this prisoner. The Emperor would surely have all of our heads if he were to see Mantis across the bridge like that." "Certainly, as the head of the military, are you not able to visit prisoners?" "Yes, but he knows who you are. If we were to allow your audience with Lord Theo, it would look terrible. We would be executed." Jessica laughed. "Yes, I suppose I have a cult following here. That is good to know. How are we able to free my cousin of these shackles?" Mantis had come across the bridge, so Alexei was unable to speak. "I shall have a word with the Exalted One regarding this situation," he said quickly. He turned to Mantis and nodded. "Her Majesty will be leaving momentarily. Your orders are the same. Watch over this prisoner as always." "Yes, my lord." Mantis was ever so diligent. "Thank you for visiting me," I told her quietly. "I shall try and figure a way out of here. Alexei is on our side, I know that for sure. I am not sure about Mantis, but he is coming along." Jessica nodded and retreated the way she came. Alexei flapped his cape dramatically and crossed the bridge once more. I was left alone again with only Mantis for company. That evening, when I was released from Mantis's grip, I went to Jessica's house. She had telephoned both Cora and Mark to come over as quickly as possible so that we may discuss the Dragon Emperor's true identity. Jessica and Abby were seated on the brown leather sofa when I entered, in the sitting room. Snacks and drinks were arranged on the coffee table. Their mother, my aunt, was playing the classical piano somewhere in the house. The music added some nice ambiance. Abby's blonde hair was tied into a tight braid, and the two sisters looked more alike now in their maturity than before. Mark came shortly after with Cora not far behind. "I understand you have uncovered the identity of the Dragon Emperor," Mark asked, sipping at some iced tea. Cora had her hand in a bowl of chips. "Indeed," Jessica answered. "The answer will shock you." Queen Isis allowed me to retell the tale. I did not hesitate to make mention that Jessica had been there, and I also did not leave out any detail about Commandant Alexei. When I reached the climax of the story, the part about Hudson, everyone inhaled sharply. "The hatred of you, Theo," Mark said quietly. "Now it all makes sense. Hudson came back with a vengeance, tired of the servitude he was forced to endure under Isis. Now he has returned as a god." "I should have known," Cora said. "The brat seemed oddly familiar to me." "This changes everything," Jessica said, staring at me. "Now you can proceed with your plan. You must extinguish that little monster forever." "We will," Mark said triumphantly. "Hudson will be no more." "We have a plan in motion," I smiled. I really had no idea what was going on. For a while I had to think how I would venture and see Prince Oberon in his world. I could see Gaia from my territory, but there were armed guards all around me. I simply could not escape to warn the prince of the impending doom. I had depended on the commandant to think of a plan, but no such plan had arisen. I was unable to speak with my attendant and my guard. The only ones with clearance enough to visit were other Elite Four and the Duchess of Sunset. One sunny afternoon, just days before the last day of school, Tigress came to me. She had her bright blonde hair flowing down, but sported her red armor nonetheless. She wore a snarky grin, sword clutched in hand. She came with an entourage befitting a king. Many boys in Roman armor, flag-bearers and stewards came soldiering after her. Mantis immediately sunk to one knee as she approached, and I was seemingly forced to do the same. They exchanged a strange kung fu salute. "What brings you, comrade?" the samurai asked. "The Exalted One wishes for the Lord of Cloverleaf to have a companion, it would seem. Someone to share in his exile." Her tone was gritty and sharp. "I am his warden and his companion," Mantis said, surprisingly. I had not expected him to stick up for me, a lowly traitor in his eyes. "Why does the Emperor want this now?" "It is not advisable to question the Emperor," Tiger snapped. "Such talk is treason, is it not? To question the Exalted One's decisions is not the best idea." "My apologies, Tigress," Mantis had been shamed. I could tell in that moment that the Elite Four were not equal. They definitely had different views of each other. The entourage crowded the bridge. It was nearly impossible for anyone to walk. Tigress whistled, and the boys and the girls on the bridge began to move steadily. Someone was pushing through the rear. It was a small girl, a girl I knew. It was Nova. "His Imperial Majesty wishes for me to employ the royal attendant of another noble?" I asked, stunned. Nova smiled at me gingerly, her hands clasped behind her back like a nervous schoolgirl. "The Duchess herself is tied up," Tigress sneered. "She has committed a crime and is currently in prison. You are to be given her attendant." "What about my own attendant?" I asked, trying not to show my shock. "Lucille has been given a new job at the palace," Tigress explained. "Nova is yours now." "The Duchess has committed a crime?" Mantis was as surprised as I was. "How could that be?" Tigress stared at him hard. "It is within the Emperor's will to declare treason and crime where he may." I nodded. This was becoming a more complicated game. What the Emperor said went. It reminded me of that story from Alice in Wonderland, the one regarding painting the roses red. Could we recall what was legal the day before or predict what would be illegal tomorrow? He had probably asked Madison to help him with something, and then when she refused, it was deemed treason. I looked over at Nova, who couldn't possibly be happier. "Mantis, you are to remain here as the warden. However, we will require your presence at the palace this Friday. You may take your prisoner to jail in the royal city, where he will wait until you are finished with your assigned business at the perch." "Yes, Tigress." Tigress gave one look around and called for her entourage to start moving. Within minutes, the crowd had moved across the narrow bridge and up across the hill to the Emperor's perch. "How odd," Mantis said, staring at the ground. "Things are happening that I am not being made privy to despite my allegiance to the Exalted One." "I find that troubling, Mantis, that you are being left on the outside," I remarked. "That Tigress girl can be so mean," Nova said, her tone sour. "I only wish I could serve my mistress while she resides in prison. She is not under house arrest like you are, my lord. She sits in the royal city prison like a common animal." "Goodness," I was shocked. "A duchess in a normal prison? How unheard of." "Things are becoming stranger and stranger around here," Mantis observed, scratching his bristly chin. I was wondering what sort of business Mantis had at the palace. Perhaps they were going to launch their attack on Gaia sooner than I would have liked. Summer was fast approaching. The last day of school was coming, this Friday. It was prime time for a summer war. "Might I request that you speak with Commandant Alexei on my behalf?" I asked Nova. "I wish to request an audience with him." "I was told to speak to no one on your behalf, my lord," she replied objectively. "Yes, well, you are my friend, aren't you? You simply must do this for me. Just tell him I want to see him, that's all. He can come here, obviously." Nova shook her head. "My orders are from the Emperor." I bit my lip and looked over at Mantis. He was still staring at the ground, lost in thought. "Mantis," I asked, "might I request an audience with the Commandant?" "Lord Theo is to speak with no one," Nova protested. "I do not see an issue with that," Mantis ignored the little pipsqueak. "You have been a well-behaved prisoner. Plus, you're kinda my friend now." I smiled. Oh, how victorious that was. I had an Elite Four member as a friend. Such an acquisition was powerful, at least in my mind. "I was told the Lord was not allowed to speak with anyone," Nova continued her small uproar. "He must not be allowed to speak with anyone but us." "I should like to have you replaced already, little one." Mantis glowered at her. "You are increasingly annoying. I do not know why the Emperor asked you to come to this place." Nova gritted her teeth in anger, but she was quiet. I had a sneaking suspicion that she was a spy, placed within my household to gain information. It became clear to me that Mantis could not be trusted by the institution. It had become apparent to them that he was starting to get soft with me, so a replacement was needed. His prowess and power was still required by the Emperor, however. I felt bad for my new friend. He was kind but strong at the same time, and the Emperor was taking advantage of him. Yet again, the Emperor did that with most of his useful subjects. They were all expendable and had their uses. I was not certain if Mantis had figured it out yet, but he might have an inkling of the Emperor's betrayal. "Nova, dearest, do what Mantis says and go to the palace. Request Commandant Alexei." Reluctantly, she crossed the bridge and hurried up the hill. It would not be long before she came back. I sighed heavily and sat on my throne rock. "Mantis," I said, "she is a spy in case you haven't figured it out." "I am not as stupid as I look, my lord," he replied with a nod. "I fear she is spying on the both of us." "The both of us?" he asked, now surprised. "What makes you think that?" So he hadn't figured that part out yet. I was eager to tell him, but I had little time. "The Emperor is being stingy with you," I said. "He hasn't been telling you everything, unlike what he tells Tigress and probably the others. You are my warden, and you have been here a long time. You have been away from the inner court for far too long. The Emperor thinks you have gone soft, that you are treating me more as a friend than a prisoner. I am certain of this. Be careful with the words you speak, especially in the presence of our little friend." "The Exalted One would surely not betray me in such a manner," Mantis was adamant. "I have served him well, served him as a loyal Elite Four." "He has not betrayed you," I said warmly. "He has simply lost confidence in you." "In a way, that is sort of like a betrayal," he sighed deeply. He was sad. He stared down at me. I could see the hurt in his eyes. "What shall I do now? Commit harakiri? I am unworthy of this post, it would seem. If my beloved Emperor thinks I have gone soft, how embarrassing that I should be spied upon." "Perhaps I have said too much," I remarked. "I only felt that perhaps she was spying on the both of us, but perhaps that is not true. I do not know for sure. I am simply voicing my opinions." "See that you do not do that in the future, my lord." His tone had gone razor sharp. "For you to speak against me in such a manner will end up with you being cut with my blade. His Imperial Majesty would not betray me. Silence yourself, Lord Theo." I swallowed hard. I had crossed an unknown line and sent poor Mantis into a rage. He had simply lost confidence in me, as his liege had lost confidence in him. I sighed heavily. He was unable to comprehend his Emperor ever betraying him like this. It was the perfect propaganda. The service to the Emperor was eternal, and the Emperor could do no wrong. Before I could say much more, Nova had returned with Commandant Alexei. He walked with his white knights and nodded in my direction. "Lord Cloverleaf," he bowed gently. I was still worthy of a bow, it appeared. "I was told you had requested an audience with me." "A prisoner should not be allowed to request such things," Mantis growls. "See that you do not accept any request from him in the future, or I will tell the Dragon Emperor that you are conspiring with him." "Calm your tongue, Mantis," the Commandant stressed. "To accuse your Commandant of treason is treason within itself." "I am certain I rank higher than you," Mantis argued. "You bowed before this man, this lord, so you are lower than him." "Aristocrats are higher than all of us, Mantis," Alexei carried on. "They are bestowed titles, they hold lands, they are above us in the hierarchy. We show them every courtesy befitting their rank. The only ones above them are the princes and princesses, then the Emperor himself. Do not bore me with such accusations." Mantis was very angry now. He was huffing and puffing, his hand on his hilt. "Do not draw your blade," Alexei hissed. "Such an act would certainly be treason, and warrant your death at my own hand." "Get across the bridge," I yelled at him, "before you kill someone." For once Mantis obeyed. I think deep down he knew if he had lashed out against either of us, he would be executed. The Emperor would have figured he had gone mad and simply put the lumbering beast to sleep. "What is the matter with him?" Alexei asked. "I said something that upset him," I remarked, looking over at Nova. "He does not like Nova, and I find her placement here quite unneeded. However, the Emperor feels I should have a nattering companion." "I have learned that you will be imprisoned in the Royal City prison this coming weekend," he told me, staring at me intently. His eyes were somehow dancing, telling me everything would be fine. "Unfortunately, you will miss the last day of school celebrations." "That is fine with me," I sighed. "I could not possibly have fun there anyway. Look at me. I am hated by the Emperor." Security will be tight that weekend, Alexei said, waltzing around my small clearing. He was nervous, I could tell. Something was going to happen. I wish I could have said something, but Nova was watching us intently. Now, what is it you wish to speak about? You have already crushed my dreams, I joked. I will be imprisoned this weekend. No sense in me saying anything now. You treat my Lord Theo in a most friendly manner, Nova observed. He is a captive prisoner, and so he should be treated as such. Alexei inhaled sharply, attempting to control his rage. This commoner had questioned his morals. I suggest, my little friend, that you stop yourself the next time you dare to speak in the presence of those of higher rank, he stammered. You are an attendant, and unlike before, you are only to speak when spoken to. Do you understand? You are part of the furniture here, not a bloody commentator. Nova bowed her head, extremely embarrassed. Oh, how I desired she leave my presence forever. That would not happen, not within the Emperor playing the part of a most watchful tyrant. You really ought to discipline these commoners, Alexei growled. Even if you are a prisoner, you are still a lord. They're all right, I murmured, crossing my arms. I missed Lucille and I missed Victor. Those two would never speak out of turn, and they were more of my friends than servants. If there is nothing more you wish to discuss, I really should be going. If I linger here much longer, they will think I am in cahoots with you. I nodded and the Commandant crossed the bridge. He said nothing as Mantis walked past. Mantis, I said, staring at Nova, would you do me a favor? Nova here has spoken out of turn, and she has insulted your Commandant. Would you mind giving her a light tap with your sword? Nova cringed as Mantis touched both her shoulders with his sword slightly. She had been injured in the game, a sort of reprimanding. She sunk to the grass, pretending to be injured. That should teach you not to talk out of turn, I said, staring down at her. That concludes Chapter 9, A Lord Imprisoned. All has been revealed. The bratty Hudson Shepherd is truly the Dragon Emperor. Who would have thought? It now all comes down to this. Join me next week when I read Chapter 10, The End Begins. Thank you all again for your support. Enjoy your week, and we'll see you next time. Dragon Boats by Fass is the music used during this novel on the podcast. Find us online on Facebook and Instagram by searching @Everglade Chronicles. You can find all 3 of the Everglade Chronicles novels exclusively on Amazon. Thank you kindly for your support.